What's up, guys? Before we get into the video today, I just want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Thrive Fantasy. Come prop up on Thrive Fantasy this season. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports app for player props. All you have to do is choose 10 out of the 20 player prop options to build your lineup. Use promo code HIVE, that is HIVE, when you sign up today, and you will receive an instant $20 bonus on your first deposit of $20 or more. Download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or the Play Store, or by visiting their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and prop up today. What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in today. I am thrilled to be joined by Tracy Sandler, 49ers Fangirl and of Fangirl Sports Network. Tracy, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Everything's starting to clear up here from the fires, and it's
Good.
Saturday after all, so everything's looking up.
Fantastic.
How is it reporting now that everybody's dealing with COVID?
You know what? It's been fine. The 49ers, the league has made it pretty seamless. It's a little bit different being at practice just in terms of, where we can go, but it's really been fine. Our interviews are on Zoom, which has been working out. So honestly, it's been fine. It was different in the beginning, but it's been a pretty seamless adjustment.
That's good. That's nice to hear, because I was always wondering, like, are you able to kind of grasp everything? And that kind of leads me to my next question is, what is the overall vibe of this team?
I think the vibe of this team is very similar to really what we saw last year. This is a team that's still having a lot of fun. Little bit different when you went to the Super Bowl, and now the expectations, of course, the expectations are, of course, a lot higher. But the vibe of this team is still one that's having fun. And the vibe of this team, and a number of the guys have talked about it, is a team that feels that they have unfinished business. So they're very focused, and they look really good, but they're still having fun, which I think is really important, because sometimes we forget football is a game and it should be fun. And I think teams that have fun playing it just do better. Obviously, winning is more fun than losing. But I think one of the cool things about this team is really since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch got there, there's been this positive feeling, even when things weren't going great. And you still have that vibe. So that would be my assessment of the vibe of the team.
That's good to hear. I mean, last year it was a very fun vibe, at least from the outside looking in. It looked like the guys were just, having a good time, and they were winning, so there wasn't really anything to be sad about. I recently spoke with Grant Cohn of Sports Illustrated, who's kind of the reporter fans love to hate, but he kind of made the argument that Emmanuel Sanders ruined, I don't want to say ruined, but tainted their seriousness and kind of made the wide receivers a little more fun-loving, and he made that argument. I don't know if I agree with it, but this team, they definitely seem like they're on a mission. It seems like they know that there's unfinished business, like you said, and they're ready to do whatever it takes to get the job done. So I hope they're able to do that, because that's awesome. The 49ers, Tracy, recently had to, it looks like, scale back a practice, largely due to injuries, and they kind of, instead of having a normal practice, they went through more of like a walkthrough. Are you concerned about these injuries?
No, that was on Thursday. No, I'm really not concerned about these injuries. I think it remains to be seen how serious a couple of them are. But I think right now we're in training camp, and there's just no reason for guys to push it the way they would during a season. And that's something I think fans always want to remember, is that if someone's got a strained hamstring, let's say, for instance, there's no reason to push that in a training camp practice. But if it was the season, it would be a very different situation. So I think they're just being cautious and being smart. I don't think, there are a couple injuries that are up in the air as to how long guys will be out. But I for the most part, no, I am not concerned about, some of the things we saw. I know people were concerned. George Kittle left practice Wednesday with some hamstring tightness. He went through all his testing. He was totally fine. Shanahan said yesterday, they're basically saving him from himself. Like, George Kittle has one speed, and that's how he knows how to play in practice. And that's part of what makes George Kittle so special. But there's no reason to put him in that position at this point before the season has even started.
That's good to hear because when I saw that news that Brandon Ayuk kind of got injured,
Mhm.
I like gasped, my heart, sank. I'm like, oh my God, no, we're not dealing with this again. But then it came out, it wasn't anything too serious. So that's really good to hear because I know a lot of fans, they read these headlines and they see injuries and they kind of just freak out. But with context added, it's not too much to worry about.
I don't
Um,
think it is, and obviously we'll see who's available for week one and who's not. But I don't think we're looking at anything at the moment, at least in those particular ones that we've talked about that's too unnerving.
Awesome. Due to these injuries, it looks like they signed a plethora of free agents. Which do you think, if any, stick on the final roster?
Well, do you mean the wide receivers that they've signed recently,
Yeah,
or
receivers, even Jonathan Cyprian, maybe you can throw him in there.
okay? Well, I think with the receivers, it's a little because we don't know when Deebo Samuel is going to be ready. We don't know when Ayuk is going to be ready. Are they going to end up missing a game or two? Are they going to end up missing no games? We just don't really know. So I think we're a little bit up in the air on that. I think Jonathan Reed has had a really good. He had a really good camp yesterday. Now that he's able to practice in pads, he's a tight end. Obviously, I know he's not a receiver, but now that he's been able to practice in pads yesterday, he had a great day. So I think we're seeing what Shanahan and Lynch saw in him and why they wanted to kind of take the risk reward there. Kerry Hyder has had a very good camp, and he has a relationship with Chris Kasarik. So I think we'll probably see him make the team. Jonathan Cyprian it's interesting you bring that up. He was asked the other day, would you be open to be on the practice squad now that there can be veterans on a practice squad because of COVID? And he said no, he really would not be interested in that. It's going to be very interesting to me to see how that plays out because you may end up with some veterans who end up on the practice squad. And Kyle Shanahan said something really interesting yesterday. He said, to me, a practice squad guy, many of them are one play away from starting because sometimes you can have a backup who I'm gonna come up with like a totally random example, but let's pretend you do have a wide receiver that gets injured and the number 2, number 3 guy normally would step in there. However, you have a veteran on the practice squad that does exactly what that number 1 wide receiver does. The practice squad guy may come in and start faster than the guy on the active roster. I don't know if that made sense, but that was kind of what Shanahan was saying yesterday. And I think I did kind of a convoluted way of explaining it, but I think you understand what I mean. So it'll be kind of interesting to see just how that plays out. But I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing Tavon Austin on this roster. But the receivers to me is the most up in the air of all of them. It's just because there's injuries and it's just going to depend on who's ready when.
Yeah, Tavon Austin, he's a name that I've been hearing a lot about when reading these camp reports. It seems like he's been flashing and he's got the speed. I mean, if he's the similar Tavon Austin that came out of college, I'm really excited to see what he can do in this offense. So that's a good name to watch out for. Now, Tracy, what is your favorite memory of covering the 49ers?
I mean, I think of covering them probably would be, well, I think I have to have 3. So I think one, and not in any order necessarily. Being at the Seattle game at the end of the season when Dre Greenlaw stopped the touchdown, that was incredible, especially because before I was a 49ers reporter, I was a 49ers fan. And so, I've suffered all these years with the Seahawks. Them winning the NFC Championship game was pretty incredible. And then covering the Super Bowl, even though they didn't win, I mean, I woke up Super Bowl morning and I was like, I'm covering the 49ers in the Super Bowl today. This is really cool. So I would say those 3. And, the Super Bowl probably number 1 just because it is the Super Bowl, even though they didn't win. But I think those 3 things, all of them, of course, being last season. But, I have to also say it was really cool to see when Shanahan and Lynch came and to see the locker room and the way that the attitude of that locker room changed from the season before. Because I started covering them in terms of being there in 2016 and just to see the difference in attitude, the difference in vibe, to bring something up you brought earlier. It's not like, oh, I covered the Super Bowl, but it was a cool thing to see and experience how just the culture and the character of this team changed so drastically and in such a great way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like, they didn't, a lot of fans are people that just loosely follow the NFL. They may think the 49ers, they just made it to the Super Bowl, but it's like, you got to look at it where they started out when Shanahan and Lynch came in. They were miles away. This roster was, barren for the most part. They built this from the ground up. So those are some great memories. I was at the championship game and the vibe of that stadium was electrifying. It was like
Was-
something I'll never forget. It was awesome. Now, Tracy, we're going to move into our rapid fire segment. You can answer these with as many or as little questions as you like.
Okay.
First question, is it Super Bowl or bust for the 49ers this year?
I hesitate to say Super Bowl or bust because it's so hard to get to a Super Bowl, but I do believe that this team feels strongly that they need to go back and they need to win it.
All right. Next question, who is their biggest threat in the NFC?
That's a good question. I'm going to go with the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. They're just tough. It was a tough matchup last year, and we'll see what happens again this year. Next question.
Really quick on that, I think Jamal Adams does upgrade a lot for the Seahawks, but I still think in terms of looking at complete teams in the NFC, the Saints are definitely the biggest.
Yeah, Seahawks and Saints. Those are going to be two tough battles. Next question for you. Who will be the 49ers' most improved player after this year is over?
Solomon Thomas.
Oh, I love it. That's a great answer. Seems like he's been tearing it up since he moved inside.
He has it so far. So I'm going with Solomon Thomas and rooting.
Great answer. Will Mostert repeat his stellar performance from last year?
Yes, I think he will. Now,
right.
You're going to have Jet McKinnon this year that will take some, but I think when Mostert's in there and when he has the ball, yes, I think he absolutely will.
All right. Last question for you. If animals could talk, which animal would be the rudest?
Oh, gosh. That's a really good question. Well, I'm deathly afraid of spiders, so I'm going to have to say spiders. I don't know that they count as an animal, though. I guess they're a bug. Or what?
I'll count them.
Okay. I'm going to say them just because I'm so scared of them. My assumption is that they're quite rude.
We found a tarantula at my mom's place. She lives up in the hills. Yeah, it was disgusting, terrifying, but luckily I wasn't there.
I would not recover from that.
Guys, make sure you go and follow Tracy. Her handle is below on the screen. Go check out Fangirl Sports Network. She's doing some great things over there. Check out her podcast as well. I'll link it in the description below. Tracy, thanks a bunch for joining me today. I had a blast talking to you, and stay safe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zach. You too.